Imagine an island you can see with your own eyes, but can never set foot on.
Not because of ocean, not because of storms, but because a single family has spent more than a century deciding you are not allowed to come.
This is Niihau, the westernmost of Hawaii's main islands, home to fewer than 200 native Hawaiians, and the only place left on Earth where the Hawaiian language is still spoken as a first language, every day, by everyone. From the beaches of Kauai, at the right hour, Niihau simply appears. A long dark shape resting on the horizon, close enough to feel like you could swim there, far enough that almost no one ever has. How does a private island, owned by one bloodline since 1864, still manage to keep 21st century America locked outside its front door? Niihau lies just 17 miles southwest of Kauai, across a channel called Kalakahi. 17 miles. On a map, that is nothing. In practice, it might as well be another century. There is no ferry schedule, no public dock, no number you can call to arrange a visit. The island belongs in full to the descendants of a woman who bought it outright 160 years ago, and what she built there has resisted almost everything that has happened to the rest of Hawaii since. The island itself is small and dry, roughly 70 square miles of red dirt, thorn scrub, and wind-bent grass. It was born nearly 5 million years ago as a single shield volcano pushing up from the Pacific floor. Its summit, Panyo, once stood more than 4,600 feet above sea level. Millions of years of wind and rain have worn it down to just over 1,200 feet today, a mountain slowly being erased back into the ocean it came from. At the island center sits something almost nobody expects to find here: Hawaii's largest lake. Lake Halealii is not a lake in any permanent sense. It is a dry, reddish flat for most of the year, and then the rains come, and it swells to more than 800 acres, briefly outgrowing every other lake in the state before shrinking away again. The wetlands it leaves behind shelter the Hawaiian coot, the Hawaiian stilt, and the Hawaiian duck, birds that exist nowhere else on the planet. Along the empty beaches, Hawaiian monk seals haul themselves onto the sand to rest, one of the rarest seals alive, utterly undisturbed by the tourism that has reshaped every other Hawaiian shoreline. Before we go further, if channels like this are your thing, do us a favor and hit subscribe. It genuinely helps us keep making videos like this one. And if you're new here, welcome aboard. Now, let's get into it. The island's dry hillsides hide a stranger kind of wildlife too. Decades ago, African game animals, Aoudad sheep, oryx, and eland, were introduced to Niihau's backcountry, and today they roam the scrub alongside feral sheep and goats, hunted only through carefully managed safaris that have become one of the island's rare sources of outside income. Just across a narrow channel sits Lehua, a crescent-shaped islet too small and too barren for anyone to live on. Protected today as a state seabird sanctuary where terns, boobies, and shearwaters nest by the tens of thousands. And in Niihau's driest corners grows Brighemia insignis, a strange, cabbage-top plant found almost nowhere else on Earth, so endangered that botanists sometimes have to rappel down sea cliffs just to hand-pollinate it. An island that keeps almost everyone out has, almost by accident, become one of the last true refuges for species that have nowhere else left to go.
Niihau did not start as a secret.
Native Hawaiians lived here for centuries before any outsider arrived, fishing its reefs and working its dry soil, part of the same island chain, the same language, the same gods as everyone else in the archipelago. The isolation that defines Niihau today was not inherited from the land. It was a decision, made by one family, and kept for 6 generations. In 1863, a ship arrived on Kauai carrying 13 members of an extended family: the Sinclairs, the Gays, and the Robinsons. They had sailed from New Zealand, successful farmers who had sold everything they owned to start over somewhere new. At the head of the family was Elizabeth Sinclair, a widow who had already buried a husband and a son at sea. King Kamehameha IV reportedly offered her prime real estate on Oahu, land stretching from what is now downtown Honolulu toward Diamond Head. Sinclair turned it down. She wanted an island for her family, not a neighborhood, and Niihau was for sale. Before the deal closed, the king is said to have made one request of her: that if the day ever came when Hawaiians could no longer protect their own culture, she and her descendants would step in and do it for them. Kamehameha IV died before the sale was finalized. His brother, Kamehameha V, completed it in 1864, reportedly for $10,000 in gold. The Sinclairs, and later their descendants the Robinsons, took that request seriously enough to build an entire way of life around it, and they are still building it today. 4 decades after the purchase, the island wasn't fully sealed off, but that changed in the early 1900s. By 1915, a later Robinson had closed Niihau to outsiders almost completely, and the nickname that followed, the Forbidden Island, has stuck to it ever since. The family were strict Presbyterians, and the rules they set down were absolute. No alcohol, no firearms, no drugs. Sunday belongs to church, for the whole village, without exception. Break the rules, and a family can lose the only home they have ever known. According to some who have lived there, even small things like long hair or earrings on men were once forbidden. Whether every rule survives exactly as written today, outsiders can only guess. What isn't in question is that breaking them still carries real consequences. None of this was entirely foreign to the islanders when the Sinclairs arrived. Christian missionaries had already reached Niihau decades earlier, and many residents had converted long before the family ever set foot there. What the Sinclairs added wasn't faith itself, but a particular unbending version of it, transplanted from Scotland and enforced with the same seriousness they once applied to running a farm. A newspaper writing about the island decades later called it a Puritan paradise, and the description has never entirely stopped fitting. The island's only settlement, Pu'uwai, is a scatter of simple homes along the dry western coast. There is no power grid here, no running water, no hospital, no police station, no paved road wide enough for a car, because there are almost no cars to drive on it. People get around on foot, by bicycle, sometimes on horseback. Rain is caught in catchment tanks and rationed through the dry months. At night, without streetlights or screens competing for attention, the stars over Niihau look the way they looked before anyone owned anything. What Niihau lacks in electricity, it makes up for in self-sufficiency. Families fish the reefs for moi and other reef fish, hunt the wild sheep and goats that roam the interior, and keep small gardens wherever the dry soil allows it. The one exception to the island's blackout is its school, which runs to the 8th grade and has been powered entirely by solar panels since a battery system was installed in 2007, making it the first school in Hawaii to operate completely off the grid. For a place with no streetlights and no cell towers, it is a strange kind of modern milestone. Niihau's children may be the only kids in the state doing their schoolwork on devices charged by sunlight their own island collected. In a village this small, everyone is connected to everyone else, by blood, by marriage, or by both. A stranger showing up unannounced isn't just unusual, it's nearly impossible, because there is nowhere for a stranger to blend in. That closeness cuts 2 ways. It means help arrives fast when someone needs it. It also means there is nowhere to hide from your neighbors, and nothing that happens on the island stays private for long. For more than a century, the Niihau Ranch gave residents something rare on an isolated island: steady work. Cattle, sheep, charcoal made from kiawe wood, honey harvested from bees that had never encountered the diseases spreading through hives elsewhere in the world. But none of it ever turned a real profit, and in 1999 the Robinsons finally closed the ranch for good. Full-time jobs on Niihau effectively disappeared overnight. Today, what work exists comes from a handful of guided hunting trips, a small support role tied to a U.S. Navy installation, and a few positions at the island's one school. For most families, that isn't enough to live on, and it never fully was. What fills the gap is something the outside world can't manufacture: shells. Because no rivers run into the ocean around Niihau, its surrounding reefs stay unusually pure, and the tiny shells that wash up on its beaches, some barely larger than a grain of rice, are unlike shells found anywhere else in Hawaii. Gathering enough matching shells in the right color and size for a single lei can take an artisan a year, sometimes two. Every shell is cleaned by hand, pierced with a fine needle, and strung with a touch light enough not to shatter it. A finished Niihau shell lei is legally protected under Hawaii law, and one of the only pieces of jewelry in the world that can be insured like a gemstone. Some have sold for tens of thousands of dollars. It is, quite literally, patience turned into currency. The most prized of these shells is called Kahalalani, named centuries ago for one of Niihau's earliest chiefs, and it comes in reds, purples, and near black so small that a single elaborate lei might require several thousand of them, sorted one at a time by hand on a kitchen table. To even be legally sold as a genuine Niihau shell lei under Hawaii law, a piece has to be made from at least 80% shells actually gathered on Niihau's own beaches, a rule written specifically to stop the rest of the world from cashing in on a tradition it never earned. Language on Niihau has survived the way almost nothing else has anywhere in Hawaii. Alalo Hawaii isn't a heritage language here, spoken at ceremonies and forgotten at home. It is the language people are raised in, the one grandparents use with grandchildren, the one spoken across the dinner table without a second thought. Linguists consider the Niihau dialect critically endangered, not because it has vanished, but because so few people alive still speak it, and almost all of them live on one small, hard-to-reach island. As families increasingly split their time between Niihau and Kauai, a charter school in the town of Keikaha now carries part of that responsibility, teaching Niihau children their own dialect when the island itself can't hold them full-time. As of this year, that school is fighting to stay open at all, caught in a legal dispute over its lease. If it closes, one more thread connecting Niihau's children to their own language grows thinner. Nothing reveals what isolation actually means on Niihau like a single week in December 1941. On the morning of December 7th, a Japanese fighter pilot named Shigenori Nishikaichi, flying escort during the second wave of the attack on Pearl Harbor, took a bullet through his fuel tank. His commanders had told him that if his aircraft was damaged, he should divert to a small island to the west that Japanese intelligence believed was uninhabited, and wait there for a submarine. Niihau was not uninhabited. About 136 people lived there. When Nishikaichi crash-landed, a local resident named Hawila Keliohano rushed to help him, took his pistol and his papers before he fully understood what he was looking at, and led him toward the village. No one on Niihau had heard about Pearl Harbor yet. Word simply hadn't reached them. For a strange, brief window, the islanders treated the crash-landed pilot as a guest, even as an object of curiosity, with a hospitality that had no idea what it was extending. There was even a small gathering held in his honor, food shared, songs sung, the pilot himself reportedly picking up a guitar and joining in. For a day and a half, the most isolated island in America hosted an enemy combatant as if he were nothing more than an unlucky traveler, because as far as anyone on Niihau knew, that's exactly what he was. That window closed the moment someone's radio picked up news of the attack. Suddenly the stranded pilot wasn't an oddity, he was the enemy, alone on an island with no phone lines and no way to call for backup of his own. Desperate, Nishikaichi found two local residents of Japanese ancestry willing to help him recover his documents and the machine gun taken from his wrecked plane. What followed was chaotic and violent. A house set on fire, hostages taken, and a Niihauan named Ben Kanahele shot 3 times at close range while trying to stop him. Wounded and bleeding, Kanahele didn't go down. He and his wife Ella overpowered the pilot together, ending the standoff for good. One of the men who had helped Nishikaichi turned a gun on himself rather than face what came next. Ben Kanahele recovered from his wounds and was later awarded the Medal of Merit and the Purple Heart. But the consequences of that week reached far beyond Niihau's shoreline. In Washington, the fact that 2 Japanese-American residents, however briefly and however conflicted, had aided an enemy pilot became part of the argument used to justify the mass internment of Japanese Americans just months later. A single crash landing on a tiny, forgotten island helped shape one of the darkest chapters in American wartime history. 4 years afterward, Niihau simply went quiet again. That is, in some ways, the pattern of its entire existence. Brief, sharp collisions with the outside world, followed by long stretches of nearly total silence. Census records tell their own story about what happens in those quiet years. In 2000, 160 people called Niihau home. By 2010, that number had crept up slightly to 170. By 2020, it had fallen to just 84. Young Niihauans who leave for high school, college, or specialized work rarely find a reason to come back full-time, because there is so little on the island to come back to. It is not that Niihau's people have stopped caring about their island.
It is that caring for it and living on it have become two different, and increasingly difficult, things to do at the same time.
Some families now split their year between Niihau and Kauai, chasing school terms and job opportunities the island itself cannot provide. Others stay full-time, choosing subsistence fishing, hunting, and shell gathering over almost any alternative the modern world could offer them. Even the Robinsons, who have spent more than a century keeping the world out, have started opening a narrow door. Since early this year, the family has offered limited helicopter day tours, a flight over the coastline, roughly 3 hours on a single remote beach to swim and snorkel, and a return flight home. It costs several $100s a person, and it gets you nowhere near Pu'uai, nowhere near the shell artisans, nowhere near the language, the church, or the people who actually live there. It is Niihau seen through glass, close enough to photograph, still impossible to truly enter. A couple of Kauai-based boat operators run a second option, longer snorkeling trips that circle Lihua's cliffs and occasionally drift close enough to Niihau's own shoreline to make out the outline of Pu'uai from the water, without ever putting a single visitor foot on the sand. Both options sell the same basic promise. You can finally look at the forbidden island up close.
Neither one lets you actually meet it.
Maybe that's the real story of Niihau. Not a mystery waiting to be solved, but a boundary that is held, on purpose, for 6 generations, while everything around it changed almost beyond recognition. A king once asked one family to protect a people if the day ever came that they couldn't protect themselves. That day came and kept coming, decade after decade, and the answer so far has always been the same locked door, the same quiet island on the horizon, the same handful of families choosing, again and again, to stay exactly who they have always been. Niihau isn't forbidden because there's nothing there worth seeing. It's forbidden because there is. A language nowhere else spoken. A craft nowhere else made. A people who decided, generation after generation, that some things are worth more than the tourist dollars that would come with opening the gate. Whether that choice can survive another 60 years, with a population shrinking and a school fighting for its least 2 islands away, is the one question not even the Robinsons can fully answer. For now, the light over Pu'uai still goes out with the sun, the shells still wash up on beaches no stranger will ever walk, and Niihau remains exactly what it has always insisted on being, close enough to see, and forbidden enough to keep. Somewhere on Kauai tonight, a Niihauan child is being taught the sounds of a language that barely exists anywhere else, in a rented classroom whose own future is being argued over in a courtroom. Somewhere on Niihau itself, an artisan is picking through a bowl of shells no bigger than grains of rice, matching color to color by candlelight, building something that will outlast her. 2 different battles, fought on 2 different islands, for the same 17 miles of ocean between them, and the same stubborn refusal to let go of who they have always been. If you enjoyed traveling to Niihau with us today, hit that like button and subscribe for more hidden corners of the world most people will never get to see. Drop a comment below. Would you take that helicopter tour if you had the chance? Or does the mystery feel better left alone? See you on the next island.